I never met Marian Anderson, and I'm certainly old enough to have done so. I never heard her sing in concert, and I know I am the lesser for that. At the height of her fame, I was living on an isolated subsistence farm in Michigan, where we did our homework by coal oil lamp. And so there was very little tuning in to the outside world, except for nightly news from a radio hooked to a car battery. So while I didn't listen to her, I did read about her, as I read about Paul Robeson, Satchel Paige, Joe Lewis, Jack Johnson, 4 other heroes of color whom I knew in reputation only. What I know of her now are probably the same details that you, I'm sure, are aware of. But what really impressed me was that she looked to be defined above all else by an excellence in her craft. Marian Anderson insisted only on continuing her life and sharing her incredible gift with the world, even when the part of that world that was her homeland was telling her, you can't do that. You can't share your incredible gift with the world. Such insistence, though modest in gesture, was immeasurable in courage. I would never disagree with anyone who called Marian Anderson a hero, but what affected me most deeply about her was that she was an inadvertent hero, one who wanted nothing more and nothing less than to pursue her singing in spite of the bigotry and hatred that continued to follow her. Marian Anderson never aspired to become a symbol for equality, and thus became one of that cause's most enduring symbols. There's something profound, I believe, in following your path, the path you choose, regardless of what you must overcome. But if you are on a path worth taking, there's no reason you must take it alone. When Marian Anderson was a young girl, her own community came to her aid, scraping together funds to pay for a voice teacher worthy of her gifts. Later in her life, support came again in the form of First Lady Eleanor Roosevelt, who arranged for Miss Anderson to perform on the steps of the Lincoln Memorial. She'd been banned from Constitution Hall by the Daughters of the American Revolution. When I first learned that I had been chosen to receive the Marian Anderson Award, my great joy at the news was accompanied by a realization of what an odd fit my life was to hers, and what a greater misfit I am to many of this award's previous recipients. It's not that I don't believe I belong here. It's just that there are some differences between myself and the other recipients that I think may be worth my sharing with any young people out here tonight, the beneficiaries of this award, the young art aspirants who've already traveled different paths in standing at the same threshold of an artistic career. To look over the list of distinguished men and women previously honored is to see a common thread, a heroic social and political commitment. My path has not taken that direction. And I say this without pride or shame. Mine has not been heroic. Even so, I felt as comfortable as I felt honored to have the privilege of introducing Mr. Sidney Poitier. The year when he was the recipient of the Marian Anderson Award. Sidney had a profound effect on the artistic and social life of this country, and he stood here that night and delivered a speech as profound. He spoke of progress and potential in words so eloquent that he made us all proud and would have made Marian Anderson proud. And the thrill of hearing him speak was akin to the thrill of hearing her sing. And all the while, in my mind was running something that Sidney had said years ago when he just hit the peak of his career, something of a commitment he had made that I discerned from only one other movie star in all Hollywood, very clever. Sidney said, "We do only those roles in film that young people should aspire to. We only play the good guys." Well, I once said, "Look, Sidney, if you find a role less good, just toss it over to one of us guys and let us look at it." I think he laughed, but I meant it. I'm afraid I had a different mission in mind. I was interested in the characters with serious problems. I mean, really messed up. Like Darth Vader, Max, Troy Maxson and Lenny Small, Big Daddy, Jack Johnson. I mean, people with really bad problems. Because I knew life as a problem-solving experience. I know how to be a lesser person if I'd never seen Terrence Howard play the bad guy in Idlewild. I would certainly be a lesser person if I hadn't seen Morgan Freeman play the pimp in Street Smart. That just said, nobody should want to be a pimp. Morgan was scary. Bad guys. I remember once when I first got my first such role, and it was my chance to work with a young Gene Hackman in a PBS drama about housing integration. Well, the NAACP took exception to it and got it banned from TV. And Sidney said, "Why would you do a role that would offend the NAACP?" Good question. Well, as I said, I had my reasons. And it wouldn't be my last such encounter with the NAACP. But you know what? Sidney let me introduce him that night anyway. And it was one of the most inspiring moments of my life. My own path began in silence. My childhood was rendered nearly silent by a stutter that afflicts me to this day. And of course, with stutters and stammerers, there's always a bit of dyslexia involved with a slight bit of Tourette's as well, so look out. I was going to say, I just hope you haven't noticed. But the task of speaking to other people brought me humiliation and embarrassment. When I was no longer willing to stutter and stammer through a recitation with the stifled laughter of the other kids behind my back, I simply remained silent. As it turned out, those were the easy days compared to what would follow. Precursor happened when I was 12 years old. After a snowstorm left 4 feet of new snow, there was a medical emergency on the farm. My grandmother told me to strap on my snowshoes and make it to the nearest open road to summon the doctor. When I got to the place where there was a phone, I was unable to tell the storekeeper what the problem was. Sure, I was exhausted, but what was happening to me was much more horrible. The shock that my beloved uncle's wife might be in my hands, and my mouth that crippled me, I'll never forget. But when I got home, there was Uncle Randy lying still on the floor. His lips were blue. And I thought, I've done it. But my grandmother said that she had cured his convulsions with a thimble full of laundry fluid. 16-year-old Randy, Uncle Randy, survived to go on to become an engineer at Boeing Aircraft. He was the first member of my family to ever go to college. As I said, he was only 4 years older than I was, and the closest I've ever had to a brother. But I'm still scared to find out what laundry bluing is made of. It was when I served in the Army as a young man that I learned just how deeply this problem could affect me. In a training exercise that simulated not only the fog of war, but also what we call all hell breaking loose. The command of a combat mission was tossed to me mid-firefight, and I was asked to quickly assess the problem, size up the options, and convey verbal commands over the sound of gunfire and explosion to other men in quick and decisive manner. I had the unique opportunity to see what would happen to the lives of my fellow soldiers, dependent on my ability to articulate commands. The result, to my dismay, was worse than stuttering and stammering. All my faculties went into complete and total collapse. I was dumbstruck, unable to say anything. And it took a few more episodes where stress and chaos struck me down. One more in the Army, and this was not a simulation, but in a courts-martial situation where I was defending another soldier against the charges of theft and AWOL, counseling against the prosecution staffed by higher ranked officers, which always assured that the Army would win. Again, in the heat of the verbal give and take, and this young man's freedom on my hands, I was left tongue-tied. Finally, and more recently, as host of a live TV documentary examining the JFK assassination, a subject extremely crucial to me, again, in the heat of the interviews, I went tongue-tied. I realized then that when it came to expressing my own words, I will always be at the mercy of this speech failure. It is a lifelong handicap. I was fortunate to share my own path with many people, but one man in particular stands out. My high school English teacher, Donald Crouch. He was a Mennonite preacher and college professor who tried to retire to his farm, but when he realized there were students down the road trying to learn Chaucer and Shakespeare, he dropped his plow and returned to teaching the same year I entered high school. And he showed me how the written word could be a stutterer's sanctuary when his own words have failed him. With his help, I exploited the text of Shakespeare and Edgar Allan Poe to resurrect my powers of speech. Now, I and Lion King and Star Wars fans everywhere I guess, are forever in his debt. That, finally, is the point that I really must make tonight. I have learned since high school and Professor Crouch, through all my life to the present, to handle scripted words, where I can find some kind of organic and human rhythm in speech, as we find in poetry, in music, in written words, words written by others, or my own words attached to paper or plastic, as in this essay I'm attempting to deliver now. Or in plays or movies, or even commercials. Too bad I can't sing, because stutterers don't stutter when they sing. And I hope that makes the point. The better written plays are the easiest to memorize and to speak freely of page. The human rhythms found in Shakespeare, in August Wilson, Ethel Fugard, and John Steinbeck are ideal. They are writers who function at a deeper level of human passion and feeling. I'd like to think that that is at that level that original human speech evolved from chants, and songs, and poetry that celebrated our ancestors' lives and deaths. But when it comes to extemporaneous talk or debate or any sort of heated confrontational discourse, that is where, as they say, my goose is cooked. And that ultimately is why I am not, and have never been, a political activist. I can only make a mess of it. And there are others who can do it well. And I thank you for indulging me this time. And I've never taken the opportunity to explain that before. And I feel I have owed it. Yes, anyone with a strong belief can carry a picket sign. I wouldn't debate that. In fact, I wouldn't get me debating anybody. But I believe that if you have faith in what your picket sign says, you should be able to state it clearly, verbally, out of your own mind, out of your own mouth. I cannot. But none of us are exempt from discourse in a democracy. What I know I can do is speak through the words of others. And they have things to say and words with which to say them that I personally could never even imagine. And I've had some good alliances with some great writers in my life. I mentioned August Wilson and Ethel Fugard already. And they will keep coming. And they will speak clearly and passionately. And I will be available to them as long as I have breath and the understanding to articulate their words. And there are candidates in this room who, with a little encouragement such as they will get from the Marian Anderson Fund, will be available in times to come. I cannot equate the struggles of Marian Anderson with my own. Mine was a struggle against a subjective condition, while she endured a larger, more public battle against a society that failed her. The road of my life may differ considerably from that of Marian Anderson, but if not for the goodwill of other people looking over both of us, we certainly would not have been able to take the creative paths that we took. The similarity, above all else, is what brings me such pride in being associated with Marian Anderson through this award given in her name, an award devoted to helping young artists get started in their own creative paths. When you meet young men and women with such endeavors, I implore you to tell them this: the life of an artist will always require courage and an inner faith that you are doing exactly what you are meant to do. Marian Anderson had that faith, and the young artists out there who share it, to them, I can think of no better example to look to than the woman who had every reason to let herself be silenced and simply refused. I've always found that what one artist has to say about another artist illuminating. The words that Terrence McNally wrote in his play Master Class of what Marian Anderson might have said to her students, quote, "To communicate something of what I feel about what we do as artists, as musicians, and as human beings. The sun will not fall from the sky if there are no more Traviatas. The world can and will go on without us. But I have to think that we have made this world a better place, that we have left it richer, wiser, than if we had not chosen the way of art." End quote, and thank you.